Welcome to editing video number 2, where I talk about the rustic vibe. I will show you guys 2 examples right here of what I'm talking about, but essentially the rustic vibe is going to have a lot of really dark blacks. It's going to have very pure whites. It's not going to have a ton of saturation, and brown is definitely going to be a pretty significant part of the photo, as you see in both of those examples. Now, of course, you guys can make any edit your own, and if you want to make the brown more saturated in an orange tint, you can totally do that. If you want to increase the green on the photo, which you would see in the Lightroom app, then that kind of can give it like more of a texture, and that's kind of a rustic-y look as well. But for this, I'm really just going to be focusing on the basic rustic edit, which would be very dark blacks, very pure whites, like I said, very clean whites, and kind of like a desaturated brown. Hair color definitely plays a pretty fun and unique role with this vibe, because if you're somebody that has really blonde hair, or like the gray blonde hair compared to somebody that has brown hair or really dark hair, you can make this vibe look totally different, especially if you're in a lot of the photos. So that's something that's also, it's not gonna affect the photo or alter the edit or anything like that. But it's definitely just something that is kind of cool, because you can have the same edit with this photo and it can look radically different depending on the color of your hair, because like I said, this is dark blacks and this is bright white. So if you have really blonde hair, that's gonna make your hair look really bright. If you have dark hair, it's gonna make your hair look really dark. So it can just really change the whole vibe of the photo, which is super cool though, because based on the color of your hair, you could have the same edit as the girl next to you and your page could look completely different. So it's definitely a super cool edit. I think this is a really fun, artsy edit. If you really like to post pictures of coffee, or you really like to make chocolate desserts, if you're like into food photography, if you're into fashion blogging and you do a lot of like blacks and whites and neutrals, I think it's a really cool edit. If you live somewhere that has like a really dark hardwood floor, or you have kind of like a balance of darks and whites in your kitchen, or a lot of darks in your kitchen, or you know, just a lot of like old school brick or wood or something in your environment, I think it's a really fun edit. So obviously you can do it without having all those things and without baking brownies every single day, but those are just some ideas of things that, you know, might click with you if you're like, oh yeah, I have this, this, and this, like maybe I'll really like this edit. So without further ado, let's get into what you have to do and what you have to make this edit yours. So number 1, shade is going to be your best friend. Now you don't want these photos to be too bright, because then it's not gonna have a lot of black in it, but you also don't want them to be too dark, because it's better to have it a little too bright and just decrease the exposure yourself than to have too dark of a photo and not be able to pull the whites out and stuff like that. Because when you overexpose a photo, then it just doesn't look real. If you underexpose a photo, then you can just kind of mess with it a little bit more. So it's better for you to take the photo with it being a little bright rather than being a little dark. So kind of base the time of the day that you take the photo off of whether or not you're taking it outside, if you're taking it inside, based on the lighting of where you're at or where you're going. But just try to stay out of direct sunlight. And if you're taking a photo of food, for example, by a window, just keep in mind that you don't want it to be too bright. That's gonna be kind of based off of your environment. All right, my camera just got too hot, so I don't know if this is gonna be weird, but if you have like an all white living space, the sun is gonna bounce off the walls and everything like crazy, and that can make it too bright. And honestly, that just wouldn't be an optimal environment to live in to create this vibe, unless you have the perfect props and like you have the perfect idea for how you're gonna pretty much have everything else really dark, so that it balances with the white. But overall, you just don't want the photo to be too bright. Definitely just use shade as your best friend. I talk about this more in the taking photos course, so if you don't have that or you feel like that would benefit you, then that's definitely something that you could consider. But definitely just use shade as your best friend. Stay out of the sun, and you should be totally good to go for the edit as long as you do that. This is probably the most important aspect of the rustic vibe edit, and that is that pretty much everything has to be neutral unless you want an accent color that pops. But if you choose an accent color that pops, then that should definitely be super consistent, because otherwise it could just look messy with the browns, the whites, the blacks, this color popping, this color popping, this color popping. Unless it's done in like a very proper way, it could just look kind of messy. So overall, you want everything in the photo and around you to be neutral colors. So wear blacks, wear whites, wear browns, wear tans, wear grays. If you're taking a photo on a floor, it's gonna be awesome if you have like a wooden floor or a brick floor or something like that. If you're taking a photo against a wall, a brick wall could be amazing, black, white, etc. But pretty much you really wanna stick to whites, blacks, browns, tans. Yeah, it's pretty much it. And that's kind of why coffee fits into this vibe so well, is because coffee usually has the white cup or the black cup, and then it has like the white with the brown and the design on the top, and it's just super artsy and it fits this so well. And that's another reason that chocolate dessert fits this so well, because if you put it on a white or black plate, probably white if it's a dark dessert, and then you have the chocolate, you can really darken the chocolate, brighten the white plate, and just, I don't know, you can just make it super rustic-y. So definitely keep your environment and whatever it is that you're taking a picture of or around very neutral colors. In general, just try to stay away from a lot of colors. You can desaturate them, but you can only do it to a certain extent before it just looks super awkward, weird, and forced. Just really put a lot of thought into your environment, things that you buy to wear, and places that you stand to take a picture in front of. And also think of accessories that you buy. Think of wearing black glasses, or wearing, you know, all white shoes, or wearing a white hair tie if you have dark hair, whatever it is. And some of that you might say, oh, that's extreme. And it is for certain situations, but not for all situations. Like if you're taking a certain photo with your hair up a certain way, and that's gonna be a highlight of the photo, then put some thought into how you can show contrast with what's on your face or your hair. I could wear, you know, maybe clear glasses instead of black, because that would have contrast with my dark hair. Whatever it is, or, you know, a white shirt with black glasses, just try to have contrast and really put thought into those extra things like accessories. So a couple environment examples of kind of this or that would be, one, stand in front of a brick wall or some type of like wooden barn, compared to something like a super colorful mural, or, you know, a colorful wall, or something that just has a ton of color in it. A black and white wall would also work better than a colorful wall as well, obviously. If you're taking food photos, you really want the base of whatever it is that you're taking a photo of to, one, be opposite of the color of the food. And if you're using props, you really want them to be neutral, you know, blacks, whites, etc. So if you're taking a picture of brownies, put it on a white plate for this. If you're taking a picture of chocolate chip cookies, if they're a little bit lighter in color, put them on a dark plate so that it shows that contrast, so that you can darken the blacks, pull the whites a little bit, desaturate the oranges a little bit if it's like a cookie, for example. And if you have props, just put thought into what is actually going around the photo, which again, I talk more about in the Taking Photos course, but just put thought into having props being super neutral as well if you use props. But without further ado, you guys are about to see the full before and after with the edit in between, how to make a photo go from this to this within a couple minutes. So enjoy the Rustic edit, and I'll give you guys some tutorials throughout it and see you at the end. All right, so welcome to the Rustic edit. So a couple things just to recap that we're going to be focusing on for this edit is to really darken the blacks, really make the whites crisp and clean and pure. And we're also going to decrease the saturation a lot throughout that process. Again, you can have an accent color, but for this exact edit, we are going to decrease the saturation. So just diving right into it, you're going to have to mess with the brightness and the darkness in a Rustic photo a lot to really see how you're going to be able to pull the whites out and darken the blacks. But just to start, I increased the exposure a little. I really bumped the contrast, because just keep in mind, if the color becomes super increased as well, when you increase the contrast, you can always desaturate a specific color later on in the color section. So don't be afraid to really bump the contrast, because that will brighten the whites and darken the blacks. And then you see me increasing the shadows by dropping them a little bit and really bumping the whites and taking the blacks down there. I personally like to decrease the temperature as well when I'm doing a Rustic photo, but that can be up to you. But I did just decrease the temperature a little bit right there to just kind of take some of the yellow out naturally. And here I begin messing with the individual colors. So I'm really darkening the orange, and I kind of gave it like a red orange tint rather than a bright orange tint. And I'm also taking the saturation of the orange down to give it more of that brown rustic-y feel to it. Here I'm starting to mess with the yellows. I personally, like you guys know, don't really like the yellow tint. So I made the yellow a little more orange and then also darkened it and brought the saturation of it down. Never hesitate to really mess with the toggle and really take it all the way back and forth. Be drastic with it, because that will give you an idea of which end of the spectrum you would rather tailor your edit towards. But here I'm going to move on to the reds. First, I'm just checking to see if there are any reds in the photo, and it did look like there was a tiny little bit, so I did take it down just a little bit to take some of the orange out of that because I didn't want everything to be orange. And now I'm checking to see if there's blue, and obviously there was a little bit of blue there. I didn't want any in this photo, so I used it as a way to kind of brighten some of the background and also take the saturation down. But if you wanted blue as an accent, you could have saturated that and made that brighter and actually had blue in the photo. Checking to see if there's any of that blue. Now I'm checking to see if there's any pink or purple or anything of that sort, and there wasn't. So now I'm moving on to the effects. I am bumping the clarity to really darken the blacks, brighten the whites, and just increase the texture and really increase the detail of the photo. And then I'm gonna bump down to dehaze and also increase that a little bit as well. And now I'm moving on to sharpening. As you guys know, I love a sharp photo, so I really bump it up, but base that off of the quality of your photo to begin with and how much you like to sharpen your photo. So then I'm gonna go back into the lighting and just kind of mess with it. Now that I messed with the colors a little bit, I'm gonna decrease the blacks to really darken those blacks, increase the whites to really pull that pure, clean white out of the photo. And then I'm gonna head over to the color and just decrease the overall saturation a little bit just to get rid of a little more orange. That way it has more of a desaturated feel. So then I'm gonna head back over to clarity. Always feel free to bounce back and forth, but just start with the basics and then from there you can edit it. So I just increased the clarity a little. And I also am increasing the sharpening a little bit more just to pull the details out of the coffee, and as you can see, it's already a crazy difference. So now I'm really just going to emphasize on the shadow that you see over on the right and the brightness that you see over on the left of the photo by going to the selective tab, adding a square option. I don't really know exactly what it's called, but you just click the square one and then you can, add this to a corner, add this to a side of a photo. And I'm going to be adding the first one over on the right where there's already a shadow, and I'm just going to be darkening that even more to really emphasize the shadow on the right side. And then I'm going to create another one here in a second so you guys can see. I click the little arrow in the top left, click the square, and then you just drag your finger across the screen. The bigger the spaces in between the lines, it means that the more gradual the change will be. The closer they are is going to be more distinct, but then I just brighten that side of the photo to bring out the brightness on that side of the photo. So now the shadows are more emphasized, the saturation overall is pretty low, the blacks are really dark, the whites are really bright, and we have a very rustic edit. Yay! All right, so that is the rustic vibe. I think it's a super unique, artsy, I don't know, I just think it's a really cool vibe to give off to people, especially if you're someone that lives in like a city and you drink a lot of coffee, you really like art, you wear a lot of neutral colors. Of course, that does not have to be the only person, the only kind of person that uses this vibe. You could be a fitness girl that uses this vibe, or a food photographer that makes a ton of chocolate desserts. But I don't know, I just feel like I think of somebody who lives in the city and drinks coffee when I think of the rustic vibe, because that's what I have seen so many people do that live in that kind of scenario with those kind of habits. But anyhow, just a little recap. Keep your environment neutral. Keep what you wear neutral. Stay in the shade. You don't want to be in the sun or just be in too bright of a situation in general. And overall, just kind of keep colors to a minimum unless you choose one accent color that you really want to pop consistently. When you're editing, really darken the blacks, kind of pull the whites out and make them very pure. Pull the yellows out of the white. You don't really want the white to be tinted in any way, so pure white. Darken the blacks, desaturate the photo a little bit. If that's exactly what you want, obviously play around with it for your own sake and based on your own eye and your own creativity, but that's the little recap. I will see you guys in editing video number 3, which is going to be about the vibrant color pop edit.